Here we go. Ready? Three, two, one. There's the delay. Good. Jumbo, everyone. Welcome. I am Coach Zoe, or the Coach Zoe you know, and this is What the Foss. And today, I have a special guest with me. We're going to talk about a few different topics that have to do with different areas of coaching, different areas of sport and life, and trying to balance that with our work. And today, I am talking with my guest, Kalli. Kalli, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me.
Oh, of course. Thank you for being here. I have known Kalli. Well, what's interesting about this is I knew you at one point way back in the past, but then I hadn't talked to you in a while and our lives had gone separate directions. And then I had found on social media kind of the coaching that you do, and also that you're also in kind of the health and wellness space when it comes to physical therapy that you do now. So one of kind of the first things I wanted to get into with that is kind of give me a little bit of a rundown. It doesn't have to be the entire time, but a little rundown of like kind of the career path that you have gotten into so far. So let's go from there.
Okay, so I think we're just going to have to start with physical therapy because that's my main profession right now. And then life coaching is kind of my newer add-in that I've been working on. I've always had this like passion for the body and how it works. It's just super fascinating, which I know you can relate to. It's just, I was surrounded by exercise my whole life, went to a lot of triathlons as a kid, and then eventually dabbled in it, but it was just like exercise was like king. I knew the medical field was interesting. Now, I also could have gone down a math and science route, but I didn't, so we're not going to talk about that. The idea of helping people learn how to use their bodies to help their lifestyle without, like, I can't legally touch you with a knife or a pill. I just have to use what you have. And I'm like, that's really cool. Like, I'm going to learn how to work with their tools, with what they have to help them with their pain. And that was something that I'm like, that's going to be so cool. So I pretty much chose to be a physical therapist when I was 18, never wavered my major, pretty straightforward, graduated in 2020, been practicing ever since.
Yeah. So, I mean, it sounds like you and I kind of have some of those similarities of the sense that you want to try to help people and you think that the human body is really cool. But of course, it's not giving somebody a drug or just putting them under the knife, using your words. And from there, basically, that is getting you into this point of like trying to help people, but working with what they have. It's something that I think is helpful when we have such these kind of like ideas of ways to try to help people and impact somebody's life and their overall just physical and mental well-being. The bit of your career now, how do you find that with some of your current physical therapy, how do you find balancing that aspect of your life, like more of those professional commitments and your work? How do you find balancing that with like your overall like personal well-being and how you might spend your other time taking care of your body and yourself?
Yeah, so I'm a very transparent, candid person. When I was thinking about this being our topic, that I was like, oh man, I'm still figuring it out. And but I realized things have changed a lot for me, that things have improved. And I think that's something worth highlighting. So just kind of some background. I had a rough go of it basically all of 2022. So starting the end of 2021. And granted, I started practicing during COVID. So that was a rocky start, to be like the first time in history trying to like get yourself into a career. But I started getting really sick in 2021, like around November, December. And then within like 9 months, I lost both of my grandparents. One was expected, the other one was not. And so I just like burned through all of my PTO, all of my bereavement, all of my sick days. And I was just so sick. And it would take me, sometimes I was sick for 2 weeks. The first bout of COVID I got in January 2022, I was out of work for 2 weeks. But you know what is like interesting? The first time I took a sick day, because I had some other sicknesses in November and December, but the worst January, I was so glad that I finally was just sick. And that's when I'm like, wait a second, would I rather be sick than go to work? Like that was like, maybe I'm getting really burnt out in the clinic. Like maybe something is going on. So I started thinking about like I should probably change settings or drop to part-time and kind of like blend what I'm doing, because if I would rather be sick at home with a fever for one day and then get another day where you're just half sick but you're still at home, like
Mhm.
something got to change. Like I think I'm pretty young and like healthy, so it's too soon in like my 40 years of a profession for me to already be wanting to like tap out and be sick.
Mhm.
So during those sick times, which happened a lot, I think I was sick, I counted like 8 times in a 1 year span. And we're talking like fevers, calling off work. Like, we're not just like, I'm sick. Like, I was really sick. And that emotionally got to me. But I would start like journaling my priorities, and things were not lining up. And
Mhm.
so those sick moments where you're just kind of like laying around, it's like, well, what do I want? How do I want to live this life? Will I ever be able to walk without being tired again? Like, you're asking like the big life questions.
Yeah.
And I just realized I wasn't on track. And
Mhm.
that's when I started to pivot. So when we talk about work-life balance, like for me, it took me really getting broken down before I'm like, okay, just working in healthcare like this grind is not okay. And then, okay, one thing we got to highlight, there's so much shame and guilt in that,
Mhm.
with like what's wrong with me. I have coworkers picking up more jobs, and like I love the body and I actually really like working with people, but why am I so tired? Why am I so burnt out? Why am I so irritable with the system and like hating healthcare? So it really was just trial and error. Tried to quit my job, but then they like kept trying to coerce me to stay, like, trying to raise my rates. I'm like, well, that's nice. Like,
Yeah.
so little pro tip there: if you are wanting a pay raise and you're okay with quitting, like people might scramble and like throw up your hourly rates. So that was a free
Yeah.
tip I did win, but you have to mean it.
Yeah.
If you don't have a backup.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You can't just
If
fake
you
it out.
don't
You're like,
mean
oh
it,
man,
don't.
yeah, I guess I'll quit. Yeah.
You're out
Huh?
of job. So I ended up blending some like part-time working in the ortho clinic, and then I started doing home health, which was a little bit more flexible. So if
Mhm.
like you can start your day later, I was seeing patients like 4 hours a day because you're
Mhm.
driving around the houses. And then I went full-time home health for a while.
Okay.
And then that was cool, except it's not as technical as like working in a clinic and having like a table to like lay your patients on, mobilize, like hang out, like really get on the nitty gritty. You're just working with people who need to learn how to walk to their bathroom safely and back.
Yeah.
So that was like I was sacrificing my interest for my health, and can be dangerous at times. So I'd be scared going into some of the scarier houses, and then you get to go in some mansions and it's great.
Mhm.
But it at least helped me recover and like kind of really spend that year reevaluating. And
Yeah.
I'm gonna be honest, I did not work out much. It was more like when we came to 2023, I was like, I just want to recover. I want to be
Mhm.
restored. And so all my decisions were based off of like what's gonna make me feel more restored. So I wasn't that sporty with
Mhm.
it. Um, Although in between sicknesses, and this hindsight, I couldn't help myself. It's not recommended. If I was getting better, I would go back to jujitsu and train like
Yeah.
normal, and then I'd get sick again and miss. But I just loved it so much, and I did still end up getting some big hikes in 2022 and going outside as much as I could. But
Yeah.
I just really got clear on my values of I like things that are funny. I like good
Mhm.
experiences. I like overcoming challenges, but I really just like being outside. And that was kind of like just setting the compass for myself to at least start experimenting. So to circle back to your question for work-life balance, like honestly, I can just tell if I'm getting a little bit moodier, things are off, or a little bit more meltdowns are occurring. I'm like, maybe I'm a little off my compass. And then you just kind of ground yourself and like, I know this is kind of morbid, but one of my favorite things, like if I'm on my deathbed, what's going to be the most meaningful? Is it
Yeah.
slaving over this job? Is it not? And you just kind of make that be the framework for your decisions.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. I think that's a really good point. That last bit about talking about how, I mean, that question that you said, it's a super morbid question. I think people should be asking themselves that pretty often, because I've seen a couple things, and you might have seen some same article or post about it, but it was something about a survey that went around in like a retirement home or a couple different retirement homes, and they asked them like, oh well, like what are your like biggest regrets or something like that from like the your life up to this point, and one that came up often was people saying like I wish I hadn't worked as much. So we always kind of have this like drive where it's like, oh man, like we have to have this sort of like I've got to do everything successfully and keep working my way up this ladder and put all of my time into this no matter how I feel, because at some point in the future it's like gonna be worth it. But the problem with that is like you're working so much towards that point where you think it's gonna be worth it, that all this time from there to that point that you think it's gonna be worth it, you weren't living that. You were just basically trying to get this top goal, so you kind of like worked your way through it and put way too much time into this. Meanwhile, life is kind of going by up until this point, and you think that, oh, I'll get to this point and this is the point where I finally live, whereby actually you had life going on the whole time. You just kind of missed it because you were kind of burning yourself out when it comes to work and everything like that. Again, you and I share that similarity when it comes to trying to find that work-life balance, and having been in a career path where we actually got burnt out a little bit more in that career. It's not that you didn't care about the clients, but it's something where because of the amount of work that you were doing at that time, that happened to burn you out. And it's important to take that step back and sort of ask yourself those difficult questions of, well, is this really doing anything for my well-being, or am I providing the best service that I can doing this type of work in this scenario? But one of the things I wanted to talk about that you kind of touched on was that you, even though some things like you were feeling sick and you had these work obligations, that you kept trying to go back to jujitsu. So that's one thing I wanted to touch on with you, is that point of jujitsu and kind of the role that it plays in your life of more, what have you kind of learned when it comes to jujitsu in the sense of like, what role has that played in your life to like things that you'll do like beyond being on the mat or beyond like being actually in a, now see, I've only tried jujitsu once. It's not a dojo, is it? Well, what is it technically when you walk into a place that does Brazilian jiu-jitsu?
I kind of like the word dojo, but yeah, for some reason I don't really hear it used as much, you know.
But yeah, talk to me about that for a sec. So like what has jiu-jitsu kind of done with your life, or what do you enjoy about it so much?
Yeah, life lessons of jujitsu. So I like to kind of just first off touch on like why I got into it. Because I am not an aggressive person. I don't like people touching me. I really like my personal space, which is funny because physical therapy, where all I do is get into people's personal space. But it's in a strategic thing. But yeah, so like fighting people, you know, the only thing my family did growing up, besides my sister and I getting a little rough, is like we just hurt each other with our words. That's how we get things across. We're not like wrestling or fighting too much, with the exception of my sister. So I actually went through like a break-in years ago, and that was kind of like my unraveling. I went through a lot of depression, anxiety, had a big slump in life. It's a big turning point in my life. And then things started improving. And then once I graduated PT school, there was this self-defense clinic. And I kind of was like, well, I've been working a lot on my mental health. Now, like, I think I need to be a little bit more physically aware, because unfortunately we don't live in a safe world. And so I was like really scared, but I felt like I owed it to myself. And as a kid, there was once this self-defense class and they're like, you know, get into it, be like, hi-ya. And I'm just like, no, I am not getting into this. This is so embarrassing. Like, I hate that I'm here right now. And so then I go to self-defense class, and it was jujitsu. And I like remember part of it, I got paired up with this like 300-pound dude, and they taught me like a choke, and I got to choke him out. Oh my goodness, I felt like the beast had come alive. I was like, this is the greatest feeling in the world. And I just realized like I don't know anything. Like I really don't. So I just like it's like drinking Kool-Aid out of a fire hydrant. I just like went all the time, was super into it. And with being sick, that was hard because like I would go every morning. Sometimes I'd go back in the evenings after work. If I didn't have work, I'm staying for multiple classes. Like, I don't know what happened. I was like obsessed. And I will admit, I'm not as obsessed anymore. I think taking a year off for traveling has changed my perspective because I was injured a lot. Plus, I'm getting sick. And then you start
Yeah.
losing your love for things and it becomes more of like a performance-y thing. So, life lessons,
Yeah.
we back to context, because I really think a lot of people, especially women, should try something like Krav Maga or Jiu-Jitsu for like a year just because life isn't safe out there, like, unfortunately.
Sure.
And not
Yeah.
to pick fights, but if a fight is picked upon, your odds are a little bit better. Okay, but the life lessons are like Jiu-Jitsu, martial arts, it's an art, and everybody has their own style. Everyone has their own game. So like you can learn the fundamental moves and there is 8 bajillion ways to get into it. And it's just really entertaining. It's very technical, at least for me, because I'm not the biggest person. So I just get smashed all the time. So like having to like be smarter about it. I mean, I guess I could just lift more weights and maybe that would help, but I didn't really go that route. I did more of the, let me just learn technique and get through this. And there's no destination. Like, I am really naive. I thought black belt was it. And it's like, no, there's stripes, there's second degree, there's third degrees, there's coral belts. Coral belts get stripes. Like, you can never stop learning jujitsu, like, ever. And that for me is like, I'm a very destination. This goal was achieved, And jiu-jitsu, sure, they have the belting system, but there's no finish line other than like death if you wanted it to be, for jiu-jitsu.
Sure.
And I find it just really entertaining because I am not the best endurance athlete. Like I tried one marathon, a few half marathons, and it was like, I always, I don't know if you guys watch like, or you, like Bachelor, the TV show, and they're always talking about the contestants being there for the wrong reasons. Like they're not there for love. And so with running, I'm like, I'm here for the wrong reasons. Like I don't love this. I do this because my dad does this. I'm doing this because my sister, but I've never found my love for it, which I may circle back someday and try it again and do it just for me and not for who I think I should be. Because my definitions of an athlete's like a runner. Like you're really athletic if you run fast, So just like jiu-jitsu was like totally different. It was entertaining and I loved the technical aspect. So that was one. Yeah, there's always room to grow. It's hard, but just fun. And then like you develop your own game. Like I'm like, I don't have my game. And I realized like I do have my own style that would be completely different from yours. And you kind of start to see people's game or like their style of fighting, which makes more sense if you do it. Like, oh, that guy's like really strong, or that person's really good at pressure. I'm known for legs. Like my arms are useless to me. So I just like move people around with my legs because that's all I got. So way different than just like running. And I'm not, I'm here on the podcast where you're all talking about you're a runner. And I'm just like, hey, running is so hard for me. But there was so much shame. Like I like forced myself to run. Kept looking at the time, never got anywhere. And then I found jiu-jitsu and I was like, oh, this is fun. Like, maybe I don't have to do everything else.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was just going to say 100% on the, I mean, when you talked about the bit of like running, like, don't worry, that doesn't shame me at all for you to say that. I think a ton of people, even when they like train with me, like as a personal trainer or fitness coach, like when they train with me, a lot of them sometimes think at first, if they don't know me that well, that I'm gonna like all of a sudden like push them to do a half marathon, or you know what you should do, instead of doing that other thing you like, you should do a full marathon. Like I'm not going to shove them into that just because I'm like, I'm a runner, so everyone else has to be a runner, right? It's one of those things where I'm personally believe that, I mean, you should do whatever that activity or sport is that you love, or the one that brings you joy. In that case, that's one of the kind of philosophies behind my business and the type of people that I train, is that I want people to get better at their own sport. I don't want to try to shove them into some sport just because I like it. Or maybe the same thing for, you talked about your dad being a runner. Like, sure, you can like go run and like do that thing, but it shouldn't be that you're just doing it just because he likes it, right? That doesn't mean that you should keep doing running all that time just because he's a fan of it or he's really good at running. And yeah, I think that's a good point to bring up is that bit about that it should be something you enjoy. So if it's jujitsu and that did you well for a while, great. But that doesn't mean that while you can keep progressing forever, that doesn't mean that you have to stay with that just because that's the thing that you're in. If it brings you joy for that period of time, it was good for that time. But otherwise, it might be something else in the future. So you kind of never know.
Yeah, I mean, fingers crossed. I want to, it's funny. I know you're not here to coach me right now, but here we go.
Yeah,
I'm like
sure.
excited someday to learn to like running. That's still one of my goals is to do something, be like, oh, I like that. But it's not in my chapter right now. But I do agree. Things are seasonal too. Like right now, I took a whole year off jujitsu.
Yeah.
You know, I'm still alive. You know,
Yeah,
life goes on.
Yep. No, exactly. I mean, yeah, I mean, you got into hiking and some other stuff. So like that and the traveling bit. So like, I mean, that's one of those things as well is like I have a client who's more of just like an avid like hiker. And when he travels, his main thing is like he just wants to be fit for hiking or walking around when he travels. And that's an activity that brings him joy. And I say, well, cool. Like if that's what you want to do, we're going to make you the best hiker, traveler that you can be as far as your fitness level and make it for something for that. Cause that's the thing you enjoy. I don't want to shove you in the gym for every single day of the week. You need to be just fit enough to be able to go out there and do that other thing that you love to do. I totally get that. But on kind of a similar topic, because when you talked about, moving around different activities kind of outside of your work life in the sense of trying to find these things that you love and enjoy, talk to me a little bit about like what kind of sparked your interests in that case as far as it goes for like your current pursuits, as far as like as you title it, and it's an interesting title to me, so I want you to explain it, but as like a adventure sort of life coach, like what got you initially into that before we get kind of the deep dive into maybe explaining what that is.
Yeah, so I always identified as like a goody two shoes, high achiever, perfectionist, like did well in schools, said no to drugs and like, was super responsible with everything. And then during PT school, I had I just call it the dark times, which sounds cheesy now, but they really were. And I was like sitting in therapy and one of my assignments was like, go and have fun. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna like go on a run. And he's like, it can't be exercise and it can't be health related. And I'm like, well, that's it. And I realized I've always been so duty and responsibility driven. I had no idea what I liked, period. And then that's kind of like I feel like it was like a quarter life crisis, everything I was going through. And then it topped it off of like, oh, and I have no interests, no hobbies. And like, I only identify as a student. Like, that's it. It's like kind of funny to hear now because things have changed so much that I didn't know I liked being outside, which is funny because I was raised outside, not literally.
Oh, okay. I was like, no. I was like, back up. Let's go to that. I was like, hold on. Yeah.
I was like raised on a farm and spent a lot of time outside. And I think like just going back to the roots of like, maybe I just like being outside and going on more hikes. And I used to think like, well, I wish I could like, this is kind of embarrassing, but I used to wish, I'm like, I just wish this like man would come into my life who's like really good at rock climbing, really good at all the outdoor sports and thinks it's so cute to teach me everything. Like then like, I wanted someone to like come and rescue me and like teach me how to have fun instead of just doing it for myself, because I'm like, well, I mean, it's easier if you're dating because then they at least have to hang out with you a lot. If it's a friend, they can flake out on you. So I'm like, no, I tie it down, make them hang like no. But it was very much like, well, I don't even have friends that are that active, or I don't have all the gear to go camping and I don't have the money. And so I just had like all these limitations. But you just got to start small. And that's kind of what I did, was just going on more walks out in the hills, behind where I was in PT school. And yeah, I just did it, with the more cheaper version stuff without any glorious knight in shining armor, like, bringing everything. Like, it was just really interesting. And then I started getting invited to more things as if I was an outdoorsy person. And so that kind of helped. So I just realized I'm like, I really, going into like the final moments of my life, I'm like, I want to, what I told you before, I want it to be beautiful. I want to have had challenges and overcome them. I do want love, all forms love. And I want adventures, and adventures include obstacles. Like unfortunately, as much as I like complain about hardships, there is something so like damn satisfying of overcoming something that's like been getting you. So it's a little bit of an addiction too, and an aversion. It's a weird complex, but that's where I'm like, I think the word adventure caught me, and it's different for everybody. So like last year, I got to go climb Kilimanjaro with my boyfriend, and he does not take me rock climbing ever. So maybe we should get rid of it. But I'm sure he would. I'm and I hope he doesn't listen to this. He's like, she's throwing shade. But it's funny. So we went and climbed Kilimanjaro, and I did it, things like I never imagined. And that was an adventure. So again, when I've had people talk to me about adventure before, and I'm like, adventure might be getting the other degree for you. Adventure, like you talk about running versus not, like adventure is so personal, but it still involves like, nail biter, moments and obstacles and overcoming and triumphs and sadness. Like it's an adventure. It's what makes the adventure fun,
Yeah, I think that's a perfect point, is talking about how the adventure is basically different for everybody. And maybe that exploring has to do with both the place that you actually go to, but it could also be exploring a little bit more, not to sound like super like Zen yogi, but exploring like into yourself, exploring into yourself of basically figuring out, okay, well, like I'm hesitant to do this new scary thing or go on this new adventure. Why am I hesitant to do that? Like, what is my big reason that's holding me back from trying that new thing? Is it because I'm not good at it? Is it because I'm just scared of doing something outside of my comfort zone? Like, what is kind of the new case for that? But let's say you are the adventure coach, and let's say I go with you. I'm like, Kalli, I need more adventure in my life. Like, I've got to figure this out. What is it that somebody like you does for somebody like me who might be looking for some guidance in that area?
Yeah, honestly, I'd be super wealthy if I'm just like, here's your adventure, Zoe, you're welcome. But kind of like tapping into what we already said of like what's going on in your life. Like, first of all, for me, adventure was like, I just felt this duty to be responsible, So like, what are your interests? We talked about like, I think that's just kind of the biggest compass of things of like, what do you value? And then it's pretty simple because honestly, it's like breaking down the mental components that keep holding you back, but then also just like, what are the obstacles? Is it the finances? Is it the time off? Because I think I wrote a blog on it too, like every little detail that I had to overcome to get to Kilimanjaro. And it was kind of like the finances, because I was like, I don't know how to get the time off of work, so I switched to like, I changed paths in my career. Like I started doing travel physical therapy that took, you're done with the contract, you have time off, and I made more money. I like hired an accountant to really help me with my tax returns. So it's just kind of like looking at it, because it can be so daunting. Like, okay, I want to do this really big trip. I mean, let's just say the adventure is a trip. Then yeah, just kind of like looking at the mindset behind it, and just the fact of like the overwhelm, because chances are, like for me, I had very little experience. I didn't know how to talk to Tanzanian people and like start pitching them. And then you have like all these people trying to like sell you like their guides and stuff. And so I think just like helping be a support system for that. But it's just kind of funny because I think I used funny wrong there. It's interesting that like I feel like my focus more is just on life coaching in the mind, and like even just working on like small, not many as in a lot, but like little adventures. Like for me, it was spending more time taking the evening walk, and like really just pivoting and taking those small steps. Like maybe it is a really big trip, but just the value of like, you don't have to wait for your Kilimanjaro experience all the time. You can start finding the beauty, finding the aspects of adventure that you like in the day. And that wouldn't be just a pivot away from things. Who knows? Maybe someday if I get my dream and get to travel more, I'll have more like itineraries and like tips and tricks for Iceland, and but honestly, if anyone does need help on Kilimanjaro, I do have recommendations, and I love to talk about it. So if that's the case, come talk to me because I don't think enough people have asked me about it. And I'm like, this is like one of the biggest things of my life. And
Yeah.
so now I'm like, if anyone else does it, I'm like, please let me know what your questions are. Like,
Yeah, yeah. Well, okay, fine. I'll feed this need in that case. Okay, what is yeah? So yeah, I didn't tell you, Callie. I'm going to hike Kilimanjaro in 2 weeks. What's one or two of the biggest things that I need to know? Like I need some advice. I'm blanking here. I'm freaking out. What should I do?
I mean, honestly, I feel like I would just comfort you on it. Like, oh, you got this. It's worth it. Kind of more like the
Yeah.
pep talk thing.
Yeah.
And my advice or my experience was it's a lot slower paced than you think.
Hmm.
So, like, for instance, when I was training for triathlons or trying to get into running, or just, it's always like kind of icky, miserable most of the time for me.
Yeah.
Like you kind of just like hit this zone. I mean, we even have zones that we talk about: zone 1, zone 2. Like all of these things. Same thing with exercise. You want to go to muscular failure, and climbing Kilimanjaro was so different in that you have to hike slower than you want, that it's uncomfortable. Like I've never been like so restrained and paced.
Yeah.
And you really just have to spend a lot of time with your thoughts. And sometimes it is really steep and you're navigating acclimatization with like oxygen. But I've just never, even when I hike, I think I pushed myself a lot more than I realized to make it that same amount of like miserable sensation, like miserably tolerable. Like you're enjoying it, but you're still hurting a little bit.
Right.
And with that hike, like it's total opposite. And I hadn't experienced that of like, you have to go with the team and the guide is, always checking on you, even to an annoying point. And like, it's just taking the journey is slow and it's beautiful. And so I like really took time to like, okay, Callie, look for the flowers, look for like you're on freaking Kilimanjaro. Like
Right.
be in the moment. Stop being like, when is the next camp? I'm gonna get there. Like there is zero race. So I think that's like an interesting thing that if anyone's nervous, it's like, first of all, you succeeding is your company's goal because they want more people to hire them. So it behooves them to take care of you. So like, I mean, I hope people train a little bit because it's hard.
Right.
Especially the final days and the summit day is like, I don't know. I feel like I became a woman that day. Like I think I just changed. I'm like, my life is different. But yeah, just knowing like everyone is there for you to experience this, and just go slow. If you have diarrhea, if you're puking, you're not alone. Pretty much probably other people are doing it too. If you're uncomfortable, everyone's doing like yeah. So I don't know. It's just like it's totally okay and normal. Like it is so normal. So normal.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's an important point. Is like with some of those things, and especially something like that Kilimanjaro type hike. I think sometimes some of these like adventure um, ideas and like areas of things that people go on, they think that even when they get to that point, like even when that thing is booked or even when they're out there, they might be like, oh man, well, like I gotta, like you said, I gotta like do to like keep up to like go to the next camp. Like I gotta like stay strong and like get to each checkpoint along the way. Or that, oh man, I'm feeling these symptoms. That must be some like weakness of mine. Like everyone else seems like they're normal and doing fine, but I feel like this. Whatever that thing that you're going through, it's okay. Like it's something that everybody kind of goes through something like that, and you're not alone in that, or that doesn't make you weaker at like trying that adventure just because some things might be going like a little bit down the wrong path in your mind, or might not be that good at it.
Also, medical caveat: if necessary, don't summit. Like
Oh, well.
if you could die from it, like that's my motto. Like fun, like dying isn't fun. So like I'm really not that much of an adrenaline junkie. If something's like questionable, I'm like, well, dying doesn't sound like fun today, so I'll
Gotcha.
pass.
Okay, so
I shouldn't invite you to do one of those like the like flying squirrel suit things for like skydiving. You know, where they like take that like wing suit that they have and just like glide down the mountain. Is that not you?
I don't know. I'm like, I always am like, I love money. So I'm like, well, maybe how much? Like $1 billion.
For a
Like,
price. Yeah.
No, I get you. I get you. Let's change it up just a little bit. Let's say if I'm trying to set up that idea for adventure in that case, and if I'm trying to set that up, but it seems like everything with like my work and my current life habits right now, those things feel like chaotic, or they feel like a little bit out of control. In that case, what would be some of the things that you do or you would tell your clients to do when it comes to something of kind of like regaining either like focus in their life of like here's the things that are important, or like finding that balance back in their life if everything feels like it's like raining down on them enough, nothing feels like controllable.
yeah. Well, I instantly like, wow, that's a hard question because it's like there's so much
Yep.
I just want to dissect with them. Like, what are you
Totally.
spending your time on? You know,
Mhm.
and how is that bringing you meaning towards not even towards your goals, but towards just like your life priorities and values? Like, is
Yeah.
it? Because sometimes like we go on autopilot, and then we're like caught up doing things like, well, I need this productivity because my work is saying so. I need to do this because my patients are dependent, like all these things that are so good intentioned. But then realizing like actually I do need to put up some boundaries here. Or, maybe like I thought I liked running, but I actually don't like running.
Yeah.
Just kind of like actually stepping back and analyzing like where's all the time and energy going, and is it
Mhm.
serving you in the way that you want? Because at the end of the day, like I have nothing to push. Like you said, just because you run, you don't think people should run. Just because I decided to do Kilimanjaro, no one else needs to do it. Like that was just something I was inclined to do. And so it's just kind of like it's hard to unpack that with you right now because like I would just want to like look at and just bring awareness. That's the first step I think I do with everybody is just awareness, and awareness like mentally of all the busy brained going on, all the freaking out tension of like stress levels, but also just aware somatically like what are they feeling? Because I know it sounds counterintuitive to just make people stop and pause and assess their body and like, where do you feel tensions? What is
Mhm.
it asking? Like one person was like, I just really feel like my neck is so tight. I'm like, okay. And so we like kind of delved into like the sensations, if she could describe it to me. And then she's like, I just think it's wanting me to stretch it. I'm like, okay, so let's do some neck stretches. I'm like, I love stretching necks. Let's stretch it together, and it's, virtual, but bringing
Yeah.
that like presentness, awareness. And I know it's so hard because at least my brain is like, I don't have time to breathe. I don't have time to, scan my body. I know what my problems are. I need
Yeah.
money, I need time. Like, and it's very rebellious. And so just kind of like getting
Sure.
people to pause and like actually spend time in their skin for just a few seconds, then coming back
Yeah.
to it. And that's one of my favorite techniques, just even since I went through my own traumas and, issues. It drove me nuts. I'd sit in the therapist office wanting to just verbal diarrhea everything. And he kept making me ground myself and work on my nervous system. And then once I was calm,
Mhm.
we could actually analyze situations, which meant most of
Mhm.
at least the first month or two, we're just grounding my nervous system to like calm down, because when you're in a calmer, more logical state, then you're more
Mhm.
creative, you have more energy, um, and you can just evaluate things more. You're not thinking with like the emotional components as much. You're not just it's really hard. So that doesn't directly answer your question, but if there was a lot of like overwhelm, stress, angst, like it's very much like nervous system work, trying to calm everything down and
Yeah.
getting awareness and then acceptance. I used to like have the idea of like I want people to be aware and just accept it. Nothing's gone wrong. We're not fixing anything. And then going into intention. Like what are we going to do now? And it's not a bing bang boom thing. It kind of goes in and out of all three of them. But
Mhm.
yeah, that's honestly I'm not going to give them a checklist of like, what to do, because I don't know
Yeah.
what's best for every person. Only they do. It's just kind of really cool to help facilitate that experience for them.
Yeah. Yeah. So you work in a sense more of like a guide in that sense than you are a direct teacher of like, here's the exact way that you do this with steps 1 through 5. It's more just, yeah, trying to guide them to this sense, like you were saying, of more of that calmness and tranquility, and finding this place where you can then, once you're calm and once you have your thoughts collected, then you can really take a second look at it and see, oh, okay, maybe this thing is why it's chaotic, or maybe I don't enjoy this thing as much as I used to. Before we totally wrap up, because we're kind of down to the last little bits of this, um, I have basically one more question, and then I'll let you kind of go into where people can find more about you. But I have one more question that's I wanted to ask, and I kind of ask each guest that I have. And because I am in the area of being a fitness coach for people to hopefully, whether they have an activity that they love or they want to find some activity that they'll enjoy. Let's say for you, Kalli, if there was some like solo sport, right? Or some type of sport or whatever it may be, that you would like to gain experience in if like somebody were to coach you in it. Like, let's say you have little to no experience in this sport. What sport do you think you would try if it's something that you've never done before and that you could maybe try if you got the experience or teaching in it?
So at first you said I've never tried because what I'm working on this year is mountain biking. I'm like, that's my thing. That's the beginner thing.
Nice.
But I've already tried it and I've kind of tasted that it's really hard as a beginner, but I can see why
Yeah.
people do it. Like you can tell it's really fun at the same time. So something I've
Yeah.
never really done except here or there, but like consistently giving it a go would be rock climbing
Yeah.
for me.
Okay, rock climbing. Gotcha. Nice. So yeah, so you don't need the again, not to diss your boyfriend, but you don't need the knight in shining armor to climb up the wall and then be like, I've got you, come up here. Yeah, I'll help you climb. Like, you just want to kind of get into it yourself.
Yeah, because kind of like your client with hiking, like I just want the tools to not be limited. So if it's like, well, if I had a little bit more technique, I could scramble. Because a lot of the hikes I've been doing, and I was in Washington this summer for several months. I'm in Arizona. There's a lot of
Yeah.
scrambling that it's like forcing me to like boulder now. And every time I go, I'm like, man, if I just had a little bit more experience, this would be good. And I could do, sometimes I haven't been able to complete things because I'm like, yeah, I'm not going up that because no one's getting me down. Like I'm just gonna stay up there.
Yeah, I've tried mountain biking. I've only fell off a handful of times, but I remember it being exhausting. But I remember seeing the fun parts of it as well. Uh, and yeah, kind of the same for rock climbing. I growing up, never really had the upper body strength to do it, but I've always kind of been interested in it eventually. So I think, yeah, that's a kind of an interesting one that you brought up.
That's cool.
Actually, you know
Well,
what I've never tried? This is actually like, oh, my no-brainer answer. This is like something I've always wanted, and I think it's because I was raised in a religious conservative context. I
yeah.
want to dance. Like I've never danced, but I'm like, it's on my bucket list to find a studio and to just
Oh, yeah.
I don't even know what kind of dance I would do, but yeah, that's like
Yeah.
nothing to do with experiencing beauty or anything. It's just like,
Oh,
yeah, I
yeah.
was gonna dance someday. So I totally forgot because that's a sport and activity too. So
It is. No. That's a yeah, exactly. No, that's a very actually that's a really cool one, I think a lot of people don't realize how physically capable you need to be for dancing. Like it can be something that can like totally wear you out or you need a lot of strength. Random fun fact for you. When my mom met my dad, they met because she went to one of his ballets because he used to be a ballet dancer at one point in time.
oh my goodness,
And yeah,
that's so
so he's like, and again, if my dad watches this, sorry, Gary, right? But he's a smaller guy, but he's a very fit smaller guy, and you can tell like, okay, he has some background in something like that. Because of the type of guy he is. But yeah. So I always see that one as a cool one. And if I was coordinated enough, what was I a ballerina? Is that what you said?
yeah.
Was I? Oh man. You know, not as much. No, I didn't really have that experience or the confidence in it. I felt like when I was growing up, I kind of was like I had the body type of like a watermelon with toothpick arms, so I didn't really get the emphasis that like I would be the best ballet dancer. And it was probably more of a confidence thing. But if there was a way to try it in the future, I wouldn't mind doing that. Wouldn't mind giving it a go. So I could see that happening. So yeah, maybe I'll look into it. Well, Callie, I appreciate you being here. But if anybody wants to chat with you, or if they want to look more to see what you're about or any of your services, where would be the best place to find you or reach out to you?
So I have my website at just my name, KalliWilkens.com. The main place where I really just spend all my time is Instagram. It's KALLI and then underscore. This is my Instagram handle. And Wilkens, WILKENS. I don't, hopefully my name's in the show notes, and then you can just type that in Instagram, and I think I'm one of the only ones. Or maybe I'm just entitled and think I gotta be the only Callie out there. That's false, but I like to think so.
Yeah, well, sorry, all other Callies, but yeah, you're not Callie.
Yeah.
This is the only Callie. Sorry about that, but
No, they're imposters.
they are. It's understood. Well, perfect. Well, awesome, Callie. Thanks for your time. I appreciate you being here.